can be your problem and your solution. A list of the greatest lessons that I've learned the hard way. In this episode, I'm actually going to share things that I don't usually say out loud. My greatest mistakes, the moments I got wrong, the choices I made that led me into pain I didn't fully understand at the time. But more than anything, I'm going to be honest with you. This episode is about vulnerability, but it's also about connection, because I know I'm not the only one who has learned things the hard way. And if you're listening, there's a good chance you've lived pieces of this too. I'm going to walk you through the 10 greatest lessons that I've learned in my life. Lessons no one could have told me about, but ones I had to experience myself. Lessons that didn't just change my perspective, they changed who I am today. And I want to be clear, this is not a promise of a life without challenges. Life will still test you. You will still face hard moments. Those things don't disappear. But what I can promise you is this. There is a way to stop making life harder than it already is. There is a way to stop repeating unnecessary pain. There is a way to choose differently, heal differently, and live in a way that creates more ease, more clarity, and more peace over time. This is the story of how I learned the hard way. Let's get into it. Hey guys, welcome back to the High Road Podcast. This is your host, Maddie, and today I'm looking around me, and this is probably the most unaesthetic podcast studio ever. I'm currently in my closet. I'm in the middle of trying to prepare to move, so I'm getting rid of a bunch of crap, and I just have stuff everywhere all around me, but I'm kind of hoping that it helps the acoustics, that it soaks up all the extra sound. maybe that's the key. So today I have something that's been really, really heavily planted on my heart. I'm always talking about the things that I learned the hard way. The lessons that came to me. And I think that it's so important for us to reflect on those things because, when we're in the middle of those seasons, when we're going through really hard things, we don't understand why. Truthfully, the things that I have gone through in my life, the things that I'm even going through now, I'm like, why? What's the point of this? This seems like I'll start comparing myself to someone else and be like, why are they not going through it? Why am I having to learn things this way? But truthfully, after every season like that, or after every lesson, I'm so incredibly grateful for the things that I learned that were really, really hard because they made me who I am. And one thing that I'm really trying hard in this current season is just not being grateful after the season is over, but being grateful when I'm in it, being thankful for every small moment where I feel peace, where I feel growth, the times when emotionally I'm struggling, but I continue on. And I think we just have to celebrate those victories when we're in really, really, tough seasons. So, truthfully, I think my 20s have been quite challenging. And I am going to say that I think that they were challenging at first because I was not very healed. I wasn't very smart. There were things that I had to learn, truthfully, the hard way, that, maybe other people understood. Maybe it was just, I believe that was my testimony. Those were the things that I had to encounter in my own life to get to where I am today. But my 20s were just super, super challenging. And a lot of that was self-inflicted because I almost avoided healing. I found a lot of distractions. I found a lot of things that were just my temporary comfort. I wasn't really thinking a lot about my long-term consequences or my future. I was just thinking about what is comfortable for me right now, what can help me get through this hard thing right now. And when we have that mentality, it's a really, really dangerous place to be in, when we're not thinking about how the things that we are taking in, the things that we are, how we're behaving, and just what we're doing, the habits and the patterns that we're creating, how it affects ourselves and other people. And so avoidance was just kind of my master plan, truthfully. I sought after a lot of unhealthy relationships. Not all of them, but most of them. I was huge into validation seeking, and I think that this is kind of a thing that young people do, especially in this day and age when we have social media and it's so easy to have access to people. But, I just remember basically living for other people to notice me. Whether that was, on social media, whether that was when I went to a college party, whether that was when I went out, when I was with, like, whatever the case was, those maybe somewhat normal or casual things was really for me all about validation and getting that validation. And I got it in a lot of really unhealthy ways. And so I'm going to touch base on this, of course, later on in the podcast, but that was something that was really dangerous for me, because sure, it felt great when I had that validation, but when I didn't have that validation, I felt like shit. Because I didn't have that in me, I was always looking for that externally. I went through just a lot of emotional numbness. I suppressed a lot of things. I avoided a lot of things. I absolutely did not sit with myself. Truthfully, I didn't even know who I was. I didn't know what I wanted. I just was really lost as a person. And so before I could process any pain, before I could process anything that was comfortable, I would just move on from it, and kind of push it under the rug and act like it didn't happen. Which we might think, okay, a lot of people do that, but the truth is that your nervous system holds on to those things. So, something might have happened in my early 20s where now I'm almost 30 years old, and I still, like, my nervous system still held on to that stuff. And so I'm having to heal from those things. I'm having to work from, I'm having to actually sit with those things so they can be released, rather than just continuing to sit in my body. And these things happen, what I say by like sitting in your body or sitting in your nervous system, it means like when you have a similar situation, whether you see it coming or whether you don't, you can easily become triggered, or it can take you right back to that moment that you never healed from. That's why they talk a lot about, or at least I've read and done some research on, how when we go through traumatic things, and then let's say we grow up, we're adults, but something happened when we were 7 years old that was really traumatic or hurtful to us. If we're not able to process that in a healthy way, especially as a child, you don't know, unless you have that substantial support and help and guidance along the way, you don't know how to process that. So if that's something that is carried with you into adulthood, the next time that you get into a situation where maybe it affects that core wound, you're right back to that 7-year-old child and acting and behaving like that 7-year-old child. So those things happen, and that happened a lot for me, where I would go back to that place of like where I was initially hurt, because those wounds kept getting open because I wasn't dealing with them. I struggled with codependency. Huge. I could not sit with myself. I constantly needed someone. And this has a lot to do with the whole validation thing, but I was so codependent on other people. I refused accountability. I lacked communication. Any sort of confrontation for me at all was extremely uncomfortable. And, it was kind of maybe foreign for me to feel like I could have a normal conversation and talk about hard things without me becoming defensive. I was super, super quick to be defensive, super quick to maybe point the blame or, not listen things like that. So just communication was really hard for me in general. I was impulsive, and I also tried to prove a lot of points to people. And I look back and I think, like, what points was I trying to prove? Because at the end of the day, the points that we try to prove in life oftentimes have nothing to do with the other person, or it doesn't end up affecting them. But every time it affected me, like in negative ways, when I was trying to prove things to people, whether I was being vengeful, whether I was, saying things that I shouldn't have said, or doing things that I shouldn't have been doing, whatever point I was trying to prove to whoever, it never worked out for me. So what I really want to zone in on today before I get into my 10 lessons is the fact that our healing is so important in life. And if we extend that, if we continue to extend the healing and procrastinate it, essentially, we're just going to continue to cycle. Life has a way of just forcing the lessons that we need. And if we refuse them, we're just going to keep going through the same thing. And situations might look different. They might look similar, but we can spend our whole entire lives. And I'm not going to say wasting, because you hope that you would learn something. But if you're not mindful, if you're not, taking accountability or looking at yourself or healing from the things that you need to heal from, you'll just keep repeating those things. Those things they don't go away. In fact, you attract those situations. You attract those repeated cycles of bad patterns and bad behavior over and over and over again. The people that should not be in your life, the people that truthfully you should love from a very far distance, you're going to keep attracting those people into your life. You're going to keep behaving the same way. It doesn't go away. It doesn't go away no matter your environment. No matter if you try to move, no matter if you try to get into a new relationship, no matter if you try to, get into a new job, the things that are in you are going to repeat. They're going to cycle. It's not going to go away until you look at yourself. So when I started actually taking accountability, I told you just a few minutes ago that accountability was really, really hard for me. I oftentimes wanted to point the finger, blame everybody else. And until I started to, do the work, actually sit with myself, understand, maybe it's not everybody else that's always the problem. And when I started to take accountability, I had to accept the choices that I made. I had to accept the consequences that were natural in my life, that naturally happened. I had to stop the victim mentality. And I say this carefully because there's a lot of things in my life that happened that I didn't ask for, where in a case where I was essentially the victim. But I think that people really take this and they run with it a lot. And it shouldn't be a word that people just casually say. So, I think when it came to the victim mentality for me, it was just me saying, when I was in a really unhealthy relationship, that was a time when, I did face abuse and things like that, and verbal abuse and emotional abuse. And so I had to stop continuously blaming that person. I had to step away and ask myself, like, what can I possibly take accountability for? And there's situations where it's just like, there's nothing that I can take accountability for. But I had to ask myself, why was I choosing those people? Why did I choose that person? What are some things that I ignored? I had to put the finger back on me. That was the only way that I was going to stop the cycle of the blame. It also was a way for me to, work on forgiveness and just be able to let that situation go. And I had to especially take accountability for where I hurt not only myself, but I hurt other people. There was a lot of times in my life, especially in younger years, where, like, excuse my language, but I was just an asshole, and I don't think I was intentionally an asshole, but I think that I wasn't mindful. at all. And I was just kind of evolved or focused on myself, I should say, selfish. And it was hard for me to even think about, what other people were feeling. Because how can I focus on how anybody else is feeling if I'm trying not to even think about myself and how I'm feeling? Those things don't connect very well. And so that's just where I was. So, the biggest shift for me that I'm going to talk about today is just choosing self-love over distraction, and healing over emotional avoidance, and choosing peace over chaos, and discipline over temporary comfort and familiarity. And as I talk in this podcast, I don't want you to be thinking dang, she's being really hard on herself. It might sound like that. But all of these things come from a place of true acceptance. Things that I have, really, really worked on, or even things that I'm working on today. And I'll be really open and honest and vulnerable about that, because that's what this is created for. That's what the High Road podcast is created for, to be vulnerable, to be open, to share connection, and, hope that plants even a small seed for even one person. So let's dive into my list. Okay, so my number one lesson that I had to learn the hard way was that boundaries are meant to protect you, not control you. In my early 20s, almost my whole entire life, boundaries were not much of a thing at all. And that led me down a road of just continuous relationships where I was walked all over, or where when someone had a boundary for me, I didn't respect that. It went both ways. I did not know what a boundary was. And today that bothers me when people have a negative connotation with that. And I think that's because I see some sort of reflection in me where I'm at one point, I didn't know what a boundary was. I had a negative connotation with boundary because I thought that it meant I was trying to control you, or you're trying to control me. And that doesn't sit well with people, right? And if someone doesn't have a relationship with boundaries, or experience with boundaries, or a need for boundaries, or they feel that they have a need for boundaries, I should say. Everybody needs boundaries. It sounds really like a very scary thing. But we have to think of boundaries as guardrails. And boundaries are not at all anything, truthfully, to do with anybody else. It is nothing to do with another person. It's just simply, I will do this and I will not do that. So when you're stating boundaries, you're not telling anybody, you can't do this. You can't do that. When you're in a relationship, if you're telling someone you can't do this, maybe reword it in a way, but I think essentially what you're trying to say is, when this happens, this makes me feel uncomfortable. So you do whatever you want to do. You do whatever you need to do. But I'm letting you know, if this does happen, my choice is going to be this. But oftentimes boundaries really, really scare people, because then we understand the people in our lives, especially the ones that we really care about, our friendships, our relationships, our families, the boundaries that we have. If people decide to not respect those boundaries, then that's when we have to put in place those consequences. If your boundaries are continuously crossed in your partnership, and that person is not respecting your boundaries, and you say, hey, you do you do what you want to do, but I'm letting you know, if I feel disrespected because that girl keeps coming up on your phone, if I feel disrespected because if I feel disrespected because of the things that are coming, out of your mouth, if you're yelling and screaming and calling me names, I'm going to step away. Or I'm going to feel like I need to take a step back from this relationship, or I'm going to evaluate or not be able to be in this relationship. That would be the natural consequence if someone is continuously pushing those boundaries. And that's why sometimes people don't even have boundaries, because that part, the unfamiliarity, scares them more. But boundaries are meant to protect you. They're meant to protect your peace. It is so incredibly important that we have those things. And take my word for it, because my whole life not having boundaries, it felt really unpeaceful. And the second that I was able to implement boundaries and, have respect for myself, and whether people understood them or not, that's on them. But whatever your boundaries are, let it be to protect your peace, and the right people will come. The right people are going to respect your boundaries. If anything, that's going to really just weed out the people who are not meant to be in your life, because they're not going to respect your boundaries, Number 2, what you don't deal with will repeat. This is kind of the whole summary of the podcast, truthfully. As I said before, I was just an avoidant. I left someone even before they could leave me. I discarded people. I moved on quickly. I jumped from relationship to relationship. I found rebounds. I just couldn't be alone. Like none of it. I suppressed everything. And actually, in this current stage of my life, I'm learning a lot about like attachments and how people are. And I'm so curious as to like what I really have been in my life, because sometimes I think I'm an avoidant person. And other times I like look at my attachment and I'm like, okay, maybe I'm codependent, or maybe I'm anxious, or maybe like there's so many different things. So maybe look into that. Or truthfully, I'd like to have a whole episode on attachment theory and, just how certain personality types are. But I really did avoid a lot of things. And as I said before, that just only repeated itself. So the best thing in my entire life was that I had nowhere to run. And I am a Christian, so in this place where I was so incredibly low, this was just within recent years. And I'm kind of in that season again where I have nowhere to run. I have no distraction. At one point I was even looking for distractions years ago, and now it's like I don't even have that desire in my heart. It's just not there. And so I think that God keeps putting me in these positions where it's like, you need me, and that will feed everything else when you feel fulfilled based off of that. Because I always found so much fulfillment in how other people viewed me. And so that really just left me very uncomfortable then when I didn't have that. And because of my actions, I was a hurt person and I hurt a lot of people. But now being able to have nowhere to run, and God putting me in the place of like, you have to heal from these things. Like you have to be able to sit with yourself. You have to face what's uncomfortable. That allowed me to heal from a lot of things that I don't think I could have healed from otherwise. Because I couldn't have healed if I continued to distract. I couldn't have healed if I continued to avoid. And so it was almost like I had no choice but to heal. And don't get me wrong, you always have a choice. Like there's lots of things that I could have done. But I think sometimes we suffer so much as people where it feels like we don't have a choice. And that's where I got. And I knew that there needed to be some sort of change. And when you choose healing, when you're a healed person, you can heal other people. And I think that that's enough like power just in itself to choose that. Number 3, people are allowed to have their own perspective, whether you agree with it or not. This is something that is really, really important to me because it's really helped me keep my peace. At one point, I fought for people to like acknowledge my side, see my side, pick my side, tell my story. I wanted people to say sorry, to me. And throughout my experiences, I've just learned that's not the case. Like it doesn't work like that. Like you can't make anybody do anything. You can't make anybody feel anything, anybody acknowledge anything if they're not ready to do that. And even to this day, there's people that I wish that I could tell sorry to. There's people that I've tried to say sorry to. There's probably things that I don't even know that I did that was wrong that I should be saying sorry to. And then there's people to this day where I'm like, how don't you get it? Like just a simple sorry would be nice. And it doesn't, sometimes it just doesn't happen like that. Oftentimes, truthfully, it doesn't happen like that. But I've really focused on the fact that people have their own perspective. Whether it is right or whether it is wrong, people can feel whatever they want to. You can be in the exact same situation. I say this all the time. You can be in the same situation with someone, and because of someone's past experiences, because of someone what they're feeling inside, they can perceive it a different way. If you are in the same situation with someone who's extremely defensive and you're trying to have a normal conversation with them, if they are perceiving it as an attack, that is just how they're going to, like, you might be like, I was calm, like I tried to talk, like they were bringing up things that had nothing to do with it. I just was trying to, they're not going to perceive it like your way. And it makes you kind of feel a little crazy. And I think for a long time in my life, I had fought that mental battle of being like, what the hell is going on? Like, what is wrong with that person? Like, why are they seeing it as everything that this is not? And it doesn't work. That's something that I continuously go through, to this day with people. But just let people have their own perspective. There's nothing that we need to control. And a lot of the times in my life, I've tried to defend myself. And honestly, like, I believe in advocating. I think that you should advocate for yourself. I've had to advocate for my children lately. Those things should be said. And however someone perceives it, however someone takes it, whatever. And there's always something that I could do too that would be I could be a much better communicator, or I could respond better to things. But like, when you're defending yourself over and over and over again, there's no point. A lot of the times, in almost every situation, being silent is so much stronger. And just letting people think whatever they think. Let people tell their own narrative. Let people tell their own side. A few years back, I had a situation where someone was really telling a very false narrative of the things that were happening. And I defended and defended and defended to the point to where I lost my peace. It started to feel like I was trying to talk myself in to what the story was. And when I got to that point, I was like, screw it. Like, this is not worth my peace. And, that's when I felt like God in my life was telling me that the truth is going to prevail. It's not going to happen anytime soon, but, just protect your peace over everything and let the truth come out. I'm a big believer in God fighting, our battles for us. And so I just stayed silent. And I stopped, every time I heard a story that wasn't correct, or every time I heard a narrative through the grapevine of how this person perceived things that were going on, or, this, not even how they perceived it. Like, it was very false. It was not true at all. And I just stopped feeding into that. Because I was like, at this point, they truly believe that story, or they are just such a liar that, they want to protect their image. And it wasn't worth it for me. So staying silent and just letting people perceive and, tell their own narrative is, let them do that. Over time, things are going to reveal themselves. And in this situation that happened a few years ago where this all started, it has absolutely revealed itself at 1000% over time. Like, everybody that this person once told the story to knows the absolute truth. And I didn't have to defend myself or justify myself in the process. Number 4, some days are neutral, and that doesn't mean something is wrong. Now, what do I mean by that? I think I was always comparing myself to other people. Like, this is where the validation comes in. So I had really high highs and really low lows. And I struggled with just some seasons where I just had such strong emotions, where it was so uncomfortable. And when I didn't have someone to run to or to validate me, or when I wasn't having as much fun as what everybody else was having, this was really, really hard. I had my son at 22. And when you think about it, what is everybody else doing when they're 22? Everybody else was partying, having fun. They were going on spring break. And I was a single mom and pregnant with another child, very soon after. And I constantly compared myself. And so I felt like I needed to have just these high highs, and we needed to be doing fun things, and like my life should look different. And I sat in that season for a really long time where I just felt like what is my life, and why is it not what I think it should be? And that was a me problem. That was a not understanding what peace was, and wanting that validation and wanting to compare myself to other people, when I had no idea what those people that I was looking at who were on spring break in Miami, like what they felt inside. I didn't know what they felt inside, and if they felt peace and what they were going through. But what I had seen is just that it looked like they were having a lot of fun, and I was missing out. And so I had to really be able to sit with that discomfort, and like get out of the FOMO. For those of you who are listening and don't that means that you have a fear of missing out. I had to get out of that stage. I feared missing out on everything for a really long time. And now that desire is out of my heart, and I just want to do what I want to do. And truthfully, a lot of the time that is going to the gym, that's going for a walk. I'm just talking about like when I'm alone, if I don't have my kids or something, and that is staying at home and reading a book or doing diamond art. Like, clearly the desire is out of my heart to feel like I'm missing out with other people. But why this is attached to having neutral days is because if we live in a life where we're constantly seeking high highs and then we have low lows, everything in between feels really, really uncomfortable. And so we have to be able to sit with those days that are boring. I always tell my students, being bored, and I tell my kids, being bored is a skill. We have to be able to sit and be bored sometimes. Like, that is just fine. My son is constantly having these moments lately where it's kind of funny, but in the moment I'm like pretty ticked off about it. But he'll be like, oh, what is this life that I'm living? It's terrible. We're not going fishing today. We're not going to the water park. Like, we're not going on we're not doing something. I'm like, no, we're not doing these things. Having neutral days is okay. Be where your own 2 feet are. Like, be where you are present, and not diving off the deep end when things are too good or when they're not. When you just accept the days for as they are, it's so incredibly important. And just accepting those things. My counselor asked me a lot, what are some well, no, she actually tells me a lot, like, these neutral days are really healthy. These things are okay for you. I'm also someone who just feels like I have to be productive all the time. I have to constantly be doing something. That's probably where my kids get it. Whether I'm at home and cleaning or doing laundry, or whether I'm working or doing something on my laptop, or, we're out in the community doing something, like whatever the case is. And she's like, but also having days that are just neutral and not productive are okay too. And quite honestly, they're healthy. Number 5, do not get addicted to praise. This is another validation thing. If you rely on external validation, you then lose yourself without it. So when I used to seek this validation constantly, whether it was partying, whether it was from men, I just couldn't find the validation in myself. So as I said before, what happens then when I don't have that external validation? When someone isn't telling me that I'm beautiful, when someone isn't telling me that I'm a good person, when someone isn't liking my posts on social media, when someone isn't telling me that I'm a good mom, what happens? Then what happens when someone attacks my my personality, when someone attacks the way that I look, when someone attacks or my parenthood, my how I mother my children? What happens when I don't get the likes and the comments on my social media? Without those things, without that internal validation, you're going to crumble every single time. And a lot of the time you hear in like this negative context, I don't care. I don't give a shit what other people think. I think that's like not, that's not really human. I think in our human nature, we're going to care what other people think, but we have to be able to find that balance. Because I care a lot about what people think that are important to me. I care especially about what people think and their opinions when it's someone that I respect, when it's someone that is living a life that represents who I want to become. Meaning like, internally, like they are a person who is representing someone who is healed and kind and just a good person. Like, I'm going to respect that. I do care what you think. I don't care what someone else thinks or what their opinion is, or I'm not going to take their advice if they're living a life or if they are acting in a way that I don't think represents who I am or anything that I want anything to do with, or, someone that I want to become. Like, that's just not going to happen. So I think that we have to find that balance, and we have to be able to know ourselves enough so then other people don't get to make up like who we are, right? And so having these boundaries with social media and comparisons is so important with this. So we're not getting addicted to those moments where we have praise. I listened to a sermon not too long ago and he talked about this, and he said, don't get addicted to it, because in one moment as a parent, you'll be like, you take your kids to the water park or on a trip and they're like, you're the best mom in the world. And then the next moment you have to take their phone away as a consequence. And they're like, you're the devil. We hate you. Like, we can't, like, that's the same in parenthood. We can't get too attached to these things. My kids are constantly, tattling on each other as kids do. And my son or my daughter will be like, they said this is stupid, or like my hair looks stupid, or my toy is stupid. And I don't even feed into that. The first thing that I ask is, well, do you think that it's stupid? Because their opinion matters. And every single time their answer is, well, no, I don't think it's stupid. Well, that's good. Then you don't listen to what your brother or your sister has to say, or you don't listen to what that kid is saying. Or like, it's so important to put into that foundation, especially with our kids, that your opinion matters first, and who you're getting the opinion matters so much. We have to be able to just embed that into our brains. Number 6, Forgiveness is about your peace, not about excusing harm. This is really important because I sat in anger for a really, really, really long time, just refusing to free anyone, like, or myself, because I felt like once I forgave someone who did me wrong, that meant that I had to like move on from it when I wasn't ready to move on from it, or I had to excuse them from their behavior. And that had nothing to do with it. Me not forgiving someone, and that has happened a lot. I really sat in a lot of seasons where I truly, I dang near had hate for people, and that's a really, really strong word. I just was so angry. But over time, I realized that the unforgiveness that I was holding on to had nothing, it wasn't affecting them. Like, they were probably sleeping just fine at night. I was running on 2 hours of sleep. Like, they were moving on with their life. I felt like I couldn't. It had nothing to do with them. And when I realized that I needed to release that, and it had more to do with my peace, that changed everything for me. So again, I had to take accountability for my parts. But the most important thing that I learned about this was that you can love people from a distance and have like nothing to do with them ever again. When I think of the really tough relationships that I had in my life, and I've had quite a few of them, where it's like things don't go the way that I thought that they would, or things happen that I didn't ask for, and me having to then forgive them and release that. When I'm out of that angry, mad state, I realize that I still care about them. That season that I had with every person was something that's what I needed. And some of those seasons really, really, really meant a lot to me. But when things go in the way that we don't intend them to, or when someone hurts us, we have to realize that we can forgive somebody and we can love them from a distance, or we can care from a distance, but having that boundary and never having anything to do with them again is really important. And I'm also learning too that people don't have to know, like if something really went wrong, people don't have to know that like exactly what you're feeling. People don't have to know, oh, she forgave me. Because oftentimes those people just don't really, they don't really care. They're going to move on with their life whether you forgave them or whether you didn't. Again, they're not losing sleep at night. And so sometimes I felt like, okay, I need closure. I need to tell this person that I forgive them. You can do that from a distance too. How you respond in everything that you do, and how you represent yourself says everything. Says everything about where you're at in your life and where you're at in the forgiveness process, and just letting those really tough things go. And the last piece to this one is just that realizing that your worth is not defined by how someone treats you. This is one thing actually that I'm currently rewiring my brain, because when we suffer really, really, really hard things with people, and people do things that we didn't ask for, that then we're left with the burden of really uncomfortable feelings and seasons. Like now it's like you came into my life, you hurt me, and now I have to carry this 100-pound bag on my shoulders. And then you start to question, just your worth. My self-esteem became so low in past seasons, because I let other people and how their worth or how they treated me then dictate how worthy I felt. And that's not the case. We have to remember that people are going to treat other people how they feel about themselves. That says a lot. So if someone is making you feel unworthy, can you imagine how they feel about themselves, and whether they're going to admit it or whether they're not? Like, you have never heard ever a story where someone has used someone or treated someone super, super poorly, and just felt like they were the most healed person or that they were in a good space. That doesn't happen. You don't treat people poorly because you're in a good place or because you feel good about yourself. If you feel good about yourself, that's going to reflect on the way that you treat people. Period. It's just that simple. Number 7, self-compassion is where breaking cycles begins. This is so huge for me. I sat in seasons and cycled over and over and over again because I just felt like a piece of shit. And then the next thing that I did wrong, I felt like crap. Even this morning, actually, I have been going through just kind of a roller coaster of emotions. I'm in a current tough season where I'm having to really use all of my skills and use all the things that I've learned in the past. And I'm so grateful for it because I'm just in a season where it was something that I didn't expect. And so, I outgrew something that I thought was going to be in my life for a really long time, and it didn't happen that way. And now things are going in the exact opposite direction of what I would like them to be. And they don't represent who I am. It doesn't reflect who I am. It doesn't reflect the peace that I want with this situation. But it is what it is. And so sometimes I just feel not so good. And I'm having to rewire my brain. And so this morning I woke up, my kids, we had to get ready for soccer. I forgot something. Then I forgot that we had snacks and I had to bring snacks to soccer. Well, then I get there and then I realize that I have like $10 in my bank account. And seriously, this stuff happens, I'm doing the best that I can. And, I'm like, great, I don't even have enough money for snacks, And so I'm just sitting in the store and I bet you I paced back and forth around every aisle in Target because I'm thinking, okay, how can I get like the biggest bang for my buck here? So I'm not like disappointing my son in the snacks that he's bringing to soccer. I right away criticized myself. And in recent years and past years, it wasn't just like a moment of criticism. It was like continuous cycling of all the negative things. And then one more thing would happen. And then I would just feel like so beyond overwhelmed. And I got I'm so sick and tired, even to this day. Like I tell myself all the time, I'm so tired of struggling. And I have to rewire my brain. And I have to give myself compassion. And I have to give myself grace. Because I'm thinking my struggle today looks a hell of a lot different than what my struggle did 3 years ago. And what my struggle is going to look like a year from now or 5 years from now is going to look a hell of a lot different than what it does right now. And we have to remember that. We have to remember that the true thing that breaks cycles is self-compassion. One of my favorite quotes in the whole entire world, this is on my first episode ever of the High Road podcast, is from Maya Angelou. You only know what you know. And then when you know better, you can do better. There's a million and one things that I would have done differently in my life if I would have known at the time. But in a lot of seasons of my life, I was just surviving. A lot of seasons in my life, I was doing the best that I could with what I knew. And as I gained more experience, as I gained more skills, there were more things that I figured out. There were more things that I knew better. Hey, I've gone through this before. Last time this didn't work, so this time I should do this. There were more things that I was able to grow from. And that helped me to become better. When you know better, you can do better. And we have to give ourselves that grace and that self-compassion for the in-between places, for the gaps where we're not quite sure what to do. And it's okay when we don't know what to do. We have to remember, too, that you are not the things that you've experienced. something that just last year that was so hard for me, was that, I wanted something in my life, but I felt like my past kept getting in the way. And I realized that was a me thing. That was me wanting to grow from something. That was me wanting to get rid of that thing in my past that I was ashamed of, that I was guilty of, that I felt guilty. I didn't feel like I was worthy. And so that was a me thing, and then once I was able to feel like I was fulfilled and I was worthy and that's when the past things or even the past version of me couldn't come up and get in the way and become an obstacle. I could just walk around it. I could move on from it, and I wish that for every single person, that that your identity is not rooted in the mistakes that you made or the things that have happened to you. That is not who you are, and you get to decide who you are, and you get to heal from those things, and you get to use those things. Those things that happen to you can be used, and take what I say with a grain of salt, because everything can be, there's always something that I say that can be in a different context. But the things that you learn, the hard lessons that you learn, those things can be used for the good, for your future self, for your new self. And we have to be able to just let go of that shame and that guilt. Number 8, let people be who they are. It will save you a lot of unnecessary pain. I talked earlier about people's perspective and, controlling narratives and things like that. And just for a really long time, I tried to do this. Even in a lot of the relationships that I got into, I wanted someone to be who I wanted them to be. And then when they didn't turn out to be that person, I was really disappointed. In a lot of my relationships too, it was like you focus on someone's potential. Don't do that. Don't. Potential is not it's just an illusion. It's just something that is in your brain. Every single one of us has potential. That doesn't mean that we are going to be that thing. If we decide to be that thing, it's because we chose to fulfill that dream. We chose to be that healed person. We chose to. We can't base things off of potential, and we can't force people to be something that they're not. Let people be who they are. And this will again just be one of those things that filters the people who are supposed to be in your life and the people that are not. When we allow people to be who they are, when we allow people to say the things that they want to say and do the things that they want to do, then that's just when we get to ask ourselves, is this something that reflects who I am? Is this something that represents who I am? Is this something that I want? Just put it back on you and let people do them. Number 9, you can only love others to the depth that you have learned to love yourself. I was so empty at one point. I was so insecure. And until I was able to sit with myself, and because I was those things, because I felt so insecure, because I needed the validation and all those things, and then when I didn't have it, I didn't love myself. So I was really like a walking disaster, and there are things that I did to other people that they didn't deserve. And I, whether I meant it or whether I didn't, I was acting in a way that represented how I felt about myself. Because again, we're going to mirror that. And so we have to be able to first love ourselves before we are able to love other people to the fullest capacity that they deserve. Because people deserve that. We deserve that. I think of this as a parent. I'm constantly just reminding myself that I can't fill from an empty cup. So I'm trying to always do things that are healthy for me and find that balance, right? Between like spending time with my kids and giving them exactly what they need and being there for them emotionally and being present, but then also being able to fill my own cup. And I think as a parent, I think just as a person, that's hard to find that balance, because as people, we always have things going on, and just making sure that, we're managing our time and finding those balances so our cups are being filled and then we can pour into other people. Relationships require that give and take, not give or take. Like, we have to be able to pour from our cup, and the people around us and in our environment should be pouring into us as well. But as I said earlier, also being able to, give yourself grace and give yourself compassion for when your cup is low. I had told my counselor a couple weeks ago, I was like, I woke up and it was just one of those days, like one of those days that I have maybe twice a year. It was not, I woke up way on the wrong side of the bed. My cup was at, I don't know, like 1/10 full. Like, I had maybe an ounce in my cup to start the day. And, I used what I had, and just to be able to, give yourself grace with that. And, but also to be able to take accountability and be responsible for that. When I woke up like that, I knew that I was responsible for how I treated my kids. Just because I felt like shit didn't mean that I needed to treat them that way. And we have to take that with everybody else in the world, right? Like, just because you're having a bad day doesn't mean that, or even a rough season, like, doesn't mean then that you get to treat everybody else like crap. I tell my kids all the time, sometimes we'll run into, people who just like, it's like, what the hell is wrong with you? And you don't know. So take this with a grain of salt, right? Like, you have no idea what they're going through. But I've caught myself for a long time being like, maybe they're just having a bad day. Like, and I want my kids to understand that can happen and that that's normal. But I also don't want to normalize, like, you're having a bad day so you can treat people like shit. That's not how it works. It comes from within. It comes from how we feel about ourselves. It comes to loving ourselves, and how we then love ourselves in the depth that we are able to care for ourselves is then the depth that we can care for others. So you can tell with those people that like max out, right? If they're not sitting with themselves, if they're not able to have compassion and love for them, like, you can tell in a relationship, they're going to max out. They're not going to be able to sustain that relationship or sustain the things that require, just healthy relationships in general when it comes to the people in your life. Like, you'll be able to tell the people that are not going to be able to maintain those things, because they have to work on them first. Number 10, the best things in life rarely come instantly. Growth takes time. I wanted instant gratification. I wanted all of the hard things that I was am going through, I wanted them to be done. I wanted to move on from it. I felt like once I got through one challenge, I'm like, great, now life is going to be perfect. I got through this one thing. is challenge after challenge after challenge after challenge. Like, we know that. Like, life is an endless amount of challenges. And that is what makes life really beautiful. Those things are not going to go away. We just have the opportunity to continue to grow, to continue to, learn and use those things as opportunities to help us grow. But I wanted it right away. When I was in really tough seasons, I wanted to move. And I just never was able to do that because I felt like if I moved, it meant that this challenge over here went away, and my life would just look totally different. But I wasn't thinking about how the fact that, if I didn't grow the way that I needed to and let time take its course, like, I was just going to continue to cycle no matter where I was. Our environment doesn't matter in those cases. And so when I wanted to, just for those things to happen right away, I'm so glad that they didn't. And think about that in your own life, like whether it's financial, financial is always something that I just wish that I could just wake up the next day and just have tons of money in my bank account. I wish that I could post something on social media or one episode where, it just goes viral and you just make a bunch of money. And don't we all want that? Like, we just wish that we could just hit the jackpot, or we wish that we could just lose weight overnight. And we have to remember that the most valuable things in this life require growth, and they require time, and they require effort. And I look back and I think of those seasons for me and just how grateful I am that, that God took his time on me, and that the growth that I needed didn't happen overnight. It didn't. Some of my growing moments happened over years. And I don't want that to discourage you, like, oh my God, I can't go through what I'm going through right now for years. But it's small victories. It's small moments. For me, the smallest thing is facing really hard things and still finding things to be grateful for. And that's not like invalidating the hard things or being like, I'm just not going to think about the hard thing. It was just being able to, the other day I was having one of the toughest days that I've had in a long time. And it was as simple as just finding the next thing that could just get us through that moment, get me through that moment. And that was, we went to McDonald's and got a dirty soda, and we went for a walk, and we went along the creek, and we looked at fish, and we looked at birds. And it was that simple, and that always isn't going to work. But it's those moments of growth where I look back and I think, dang, this thing could have really left me really stuck. And things have left me stuck. And truthfully, there's been moments, even in my recent season, where I've been stuck for 3 weeks. I haven't been able to eat. I've been angry. I've been all the things. But then you realize, okay, this is what yesterday looked like. This is what today looks like. And tomorrow I get to try again. Or the next moment I get to try again. And just continuing to give yourself that grace that you get to try again and again and again. And truthfully, in my life right now, that is my motto. Whether it is parenthood, whether it is just me as an individual, I'm always messing up. I'm always making mistakes, but being able to give myself that grace and that compassion, and just saying, the next moment I get to try again. The next day, tomorrow I get to try again. My kids and I, this is kind of the last story that I want to share, but my kids started just summer, and every time going into summer from the school year is a little bit of a transition. And they've already had a really big transition in their life in this current season. And so, we're still going through that process. And then now it's like, okay, now mom is home for the summer and it's wonderful, but I'm home. I'm their safe person. And so they're acting out sometimes. And the other night, it was just really, really hard to get them to bed. Truthfully, they started this new thing where they started to like 2v1 me. And it's like they know that I can't get to both of them at the same time. And so I was totally burnt out. I was absolutely just capped out for the day. And I was starting to say like consequences that I wouldn't initially even say, right? Like I'm huge on natural consequences. I'm huge on practice and like not yelling and being patient, and just, letting them know like I'm going to be this cool, calm, and collected parent and they can do whatever they feel like they need to do, but the natural consequences are going to come. And just nothing was working. My son loves fishing, and I was even like, you're not going fishing, dude. Like this is done. I ended up yelling and like just totally losing my cool. And I felt like absolute shit. They were like not going to bed still. Nothing that I did was working. I literally was like, all right, hallway now, family meeting. And I think as a parent, I think as people, we have to just be able to be like, we are halting this. We're coming to a pause. Like family meeting. I need to go sit down. Just me. I need to go take a break. Whatever the case is. And I was like, we just talked. I was like, what is going on with you guys? I was like, because I'm losing, my cool, and you guys aren't listening. Like, I don't even know who you guys are right now. And we sat down and we talked about that situation. And that was my growth moment, because then the previous moment I felt like shit. The previous moment I didn't handle it the way that I thought that I should have. But the next moment, because I was able to break that cycle, because I was able to give myself grace, I said, this is what the next moment though, I'm going to do better. And that is growth. That is growth. The next moment, the next day, you just keep doing the best that you can. And that looks different all the time. Sometimes you have 2% left in you, and that's all you can give. You give that 2%. Sometimes you wake up with 110% and you can give that. But growth is continuing to be resilient. It's continuing to keep on keeping on no matter what. And having the endurance and the ability to just keep trying again. That is what growth is. So today, I have gone through my list of 10 of some of the hardest lessons that I have learned, and the things that I've had to take accountability for, and the things that nobody could have told me. And truthfully, a lot of people did. They tried to tell me with these lessons what was going to happen. And a lot of the times I didn't listen. And I think that it was something that I had to go through myself. And I had to learn, and those things were my testimony. And now I am so incredibly grateful for those lessons, because those lessons made me who I am today. But what I really want to zone in on is the fact that when we go through these things in life, and whatever your lessons are, we have to be able to understand that the earlier that you face yourself, the less life has to humble you later. To this day, I am so grateful that I'm not even 30 years old yet. And I had to go through these things, because now when I'm 30, 40, 50 years old, I can say I've gone through this and I know better, because when you know better, you can do better. And sometimes we look at experience and we'll look at people's age and we think, okay, they must know. But that's not the truth. A lot of the times people miss what, like, their alignment. A lot of the times people miss what this world has given them as an opportunity, and we can't miss it. So today I want to leave you with this. The things that you avoid do not disappear. The healing you postpone does not stop calling for you. Eventually, life has a way of placing us face to face with the very things we tried to outrun. And the earlier that you face yourself, the less life has to humble you later. We remember, based off of this episode today, that your future is shaped by the coping mechanisms that you choose today. That peace is often built through painful decisions made consistently over time. And sometimes the hardest seasons create the softest versions of ourselves. And for a long time, I did exactly the opposite. I searched for distractions instead of healing. I searched for comfort instead of growth. I looked for temporary escapes that slowly created permanent pain. And every lesson I refused to learn willingly became a lesson life eventually forced me to face. But somewhere inside all of that pain, I was able to find myself. Not the version of me that needed validation to feel worthy, not the version of me that abandoned herself to avoid being alone. Not the version of me constantly running from discomfort, grief, fear, or change. I found the version of me that finally chose healing. And that choice changed everything. Not because life suddenly became easy, not because heartbreak stopped happening, not because challenges disappeared, but because I stopped becoming my own biggest obstacle. I stopped creating unnecessary suffering for myself. I learned how to sit with myself instead of escape myself. I learned endurance and resilience when life became uncomfortable. The lessons that broke me also rebuilt me. They taught me boundaries. They taught me self-respect. They taught me emotional responsibility. They taught me peace. They taught me that healing is not about becoming perfect. It's about becoming honest. Honest about your pain. Honest about your patterns. Honest about the life you keep creating for yourself. And maybe that's what growing up really is. Realizing that nobody is coming to save you from the consequences of avoiding yourself. Realizing that healing is hard, but continuing to live disconnected from yourself is harder. Realizing that the sooner you face your pain, the sooner you stop passing it into every relationship, every decision, and every version of your future. I look back at my younger years now with compassion, because even in my worst moments, I was still trying to find love, safety, worth, and peace. I was just searching for them in places that could never truly give them to me. But now I know, and now you know. Peace is built. Healing is built. Self-love is built. And the life you want is often waiting on the other side of the hard decisions you may be avoiding. So if you're in a season where life feels heavy, painful, or humbling, maybe your life is not falling apart. Maybe it's trying to teach you what your future self will one day thank you for learning. And remember, no matter what breaks you can be the opportunity that rebuilds you. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Remember, I am so proud of the person that you are becoming, and you are not alone as we walk this road together. See you next time on the High Road Podcast.